of Management Studies IGNOU presents an audiobook on the course Mmpc 011 titled Social Processes and Behavioral Issues for MBA Program. Presenting Block 1 titled Introduction to Organizational Behavior. Unit 1 Concept of Organizational Behavior.
Objectives. After reading this unit, you should be able to understand 1. The changing scope of organizational behavior (OB) involving micro and macro OB. 2. The open system and institutional perspectives of society and organization. 3. The society-environment organization interface. 4. Social processes as sources of human behavior in general and at work. 5. Process levels from individual, micro level to society, macro level. And 6. Changing society and organizations in India. Introduction. The term organizational behavior, OB, initially had reference only to the behavior and nature of people in organizations. Given the fuzziness of its boundaries, this discipline, combining cultural anthropology, economics, political science, psychology, and sociology, always tended to stretch beyond that domain. Within 3 decades of its established identity, OB also incorporated the behavior and nature of organizations. Today, its concern is first with the behavior and nature of people within organizations, and second, with the behavior and nature of organizations within their socio-cultural, political, and economic environments. Though it was intertwined with the other terms like organization theory and organization science, yet, as a professional specialization, it has acceptably settled with the term organizational behavior. Understanding social processes is important to understand both micro and macro OB streams. For this purpose, we have to discuss the open system and institutional perspectives of society and organization. The society-environment organization interface, social processes as sources of human behavior in general and at work, and process levels from individual level to society level. Setting context for OB. In the post-COVID world, the needs and expectations of individual and organizations have changed. In a recent backlash, companies such as Swiggy, Zomato, etc. faced a huge backlash from its delivery partners for high workload, unequal pay, and unsafe work conditions. The study of organizational behavior is helpful in understanding nature, beliefs, needs, expectations, and behavior of delivery partners as individuals, management, and delivery partners as team and the overall organizations. Organizations are a group of people who work independently towards some purpose. Organizations are not physical buildings. Instead, they are 2 or more individuals who work together to achieve a common goal. People who work in organizations expect each other to complete certain tasks in an organized way. Organizational behavior is about studying how people act at work and applying that knowledge in managing organizations. It applies to the behavior of people at work in all types of organizations, public, private, cooperative sector, commercial, or service organizations. Organizational behavior is the study of human behavior in organizations to improve performance to achieve individual and organizational objectives. Organizations allow employees to increase specialization and division of labor, use advanced technology, manage external environment, and exert power and control to increase the value created by an organization. Definition of OB. OB can be defined using 3 key features. 1. Studies human behavior. 2. In the context of organizations. And 3. To improve organizations' effectiveness. OB studies behavior of people in the context of workplace where people, processes, and external environment interact with each other. The field of OB emphasizes on how individuals and teams think and act within organizations and with factors external to the organization. Such knowledge helps in shaping personality and attitude to the employees and define organizational culture, thus improving an organization's efficiency and effectiveness. Scope of OB. The purpose of OB is to explain why employees demonstrate certain behaviors, predict how employees will react to organizational situations, and influence how they act and take decisions. OB has three main focus areas. Focus on individuals or intra-individual behavior. The field of OB explores the individual differences in personality, attitudes, perception, motivations, and learning of each person. Focus on teams or group or interpersonal behavior. The nature of teams and groups is studied by exploring group norms, roles, conflicts, leadership, and team building. Focus on organization. The study also focuses on organizational structure, systems, policies, practices, and culture. Nature of organizational behavior. OB is a behavioral approach to general business management. OB helps in understanding human behavior at work through theory building and practical application. OB helps in predicting the behavior of people at work. It is an interdisciplinary area field that derives knowledge from fields of sociology, anthropology, psychology, etc. to constitute applied behavioral sciences. Analysis behavior at three levels: individual, group, and organization. OB is an action-oriented and goal-directed discipline. It provides a rational thinking about people and their behavior. OB is a science as it is systematically studies human behavior and as well as an art as it applies that behavioral knowledge. OB aims to fulfill both individual and organizational goals. The open system and institutional perspectives of society and organization. Modern society is an organizational society. Civilization progresses through organized living, in which organizations play an important role. Different types of organization are created, developed, and sustained in order to satisfy the multitude and varied needs of members of the society. Society places at the disposal of organizations all requisite resources while setting out the objectives to be pursued and also keeps a tag on the organization's activities and functions. Thus, while organizations per se are important for the society, society is the resource provider and janitor of all organizations. The resource dependence theory captures this concept when it postulates two assumptions, namely, first, that organizations and their people are interdependent with other organizations and people, and second, that consequent to this interdependence and the social relationships involved, understanding is much better served by investigating the effects and the constraints emanating from the social contexts. This is true of both individual and organizational behavior. The open systems perspective focuses on external social constraints on organizational action. Organizations are subsystems of society. Society subsumes many systems, but each system has defining characteristics such as 1. The importation of energetic inputs from the social environment. 2. Transformation of available energy as throughout so that work is done within the system. 3. The exportation of a product or output into the environment. 4. A cycle of events in which the product exported to the environment provides the energy for repetition of the cycle. 5. The development of negative entropy, whereby more energy is imported from the environment than is expended in work, thus counteracting the entropic imperative, which inevitably tends towards disorganization and death. 6. The existence of information inputs or signals about how the environment and the system are functioning. Negative feedback from internal functioning, which provides information to correct deviations from course, and a coding process that simplifies energy and information inputs and permits their selective reception. 7. A steady state that preserves the character of the system and is marked by a stable ratio of energy exchanges and relations between the parts. 8. Movement in the direction of increasing differentiation, elaboration, or specialization. 9. The operation of the principle of equifinality, under which a system can achieve the same final state from different initial conditions and various paths. The open system perspective not only identifies the characteristics of system in terms of its relationship with other systems external to it, but also provides a framework to understand the internal structures and functions and the process which bind them. Governing both these external and internal aspects is done through institutionalization. Institutionalization is the creation, definition, and execution of norms to regulate the behavior of major units of society and organization as systems. The norms, set out by tacit agreement of the units, determine the criteria according to which resources are allocated and purposes for which utilized, while prescribing the sanctions to ensure that such norms are upheld. Institutionalization defines behavior patterns required to regulate the flow of activities and resources between and within organized systems. The direct or indirect interrelatedness and dependence between organization creates the need for institutionalization for not only effective functioning but also for the maintenance of specific structural forms, activities, and rules and degree of exchange. Institutions regulate and organize patterns of behavior of individual members of the system and of its component groups. And in turn, it is also greatly influenced by their sentiments, attitudes, and activities. While the collective institution's impact is well conceived, how the individual sentiments, attitudes, and activities become exchanged and crystallized within institutions is not clear. Through processes of acculturation and socialization, institutions are transmitted from macro to micro units of the system. But the reverse analysis of how micro behavior impacts on macro institutions is considered a blind spot caught in the black box or dark arena of throughout in the system. But it is an undeniable fact that in the social exchange for achieving social order, somewhere the micro and the macro mutually impact one another, though with differing degrees of freedom and effectiveness. The balance in this exchange is inherently maintained through temporary indications of disorganization and disintegration appear. Organizational structures are purported to develop in highly institutionalized contexts. Thus, they are influenced to take on the practices and procedures that are defined by prevailing rationalized ideas about organizational work held in society. When they do this, they increase their legitimacy and their chances of survival. The neo-institutionalists challenge this postulate and call that societal expectations defined through institutions can be fictitious and mythical, as it may conflict with criteria of efficiency, profit maximization, and such other goals of organization. They are critical of old institutionalists' sacrosanct contention that institutionalization is the process through which a given set of cultural rules in the name of collective progress and justice, and a pattern of activities come to be normatively and cognitively held in place, so that they are taken for granted to be lawful either by formal law, customs, or common knowledge, and action is not by individual choice but of broad social scripts. They see that in this contention, the individualism loses out in large part to the massive institutional features of the social system. They also see a forced rationalization, which is a purposive or instrumental process that structure everyday life within impersonal norms and rules that constitute universal social organizations and collective moral purpose. The neo-institutionalists suggest 4 ways of integrating units into institutionalization process, namely 1. Representational rules involving shared logics or modes of reasoning that help to create shared understanding of reality that have been taken for granted. 2. Consultative rules that create actors, that is, identities and entities linked to specified behaviors and action routines. 3. Normative rules that stipulate expectations for behavior that are both internalized by actors and reinforced by the beliefs and actions of those with whom they interact. And 4. Enforcement mechanism, both formal and informal, involving surveillance, assessment, and the application of sanctions rewarding conformity and punishing deviance. Bringing the neo-institutionalization to still micro-level, Line Zucker suggests that organizations shall go for potential repeatable and socially approved institutional processes. Transmission, maintenance, and resistance are conceived as three possibilities of institutional norms getting crystallized in organizations. More the objectivity and exteriority, greater is the feasibility and continuity of transmission. Transmission shall be sustained by maintenance, which shall be a continuous effort. When the first two fail, resistance to institutions grow, and the reality is that they fail and resistance also comes up, though not fully and continuously, but partially and intermittently. Stability and change are to be judicially balanced through institutionalization for the continuance of the system. Inter-organizational institutionalization is addressed through the concept of isomorphism, which means that similarity in different organisms resulting from convergence. DiMaggio and Powell identify coercive arising from unilateral power-seeking legitimacy in terms of compliance, mimetic resulting from standard imitative responses to uncertainty, and normative identified with professionalism, isomorphism. The organization's tendency to model their institutions on the basis of dependence on other organizations, be it political, economic, or social for resources, policies, capital, and other needs, is considered as a method of institutionalization. When we interpret one of the most important phenomena of current times, namely globalization, we can clearly see how political, economic, and social cultural systems are shaping their institutional base on the principle of isomorphism. The crisis of systems force them to search for apparent successful and best practices elsewhere to shape their institutions. The Society-Environment-Organization Interface. The socio-technical theory of the Tavistock Group conceived enterprises as an open system that engages in continuing exchanges with other enterprises, institutions, and individuals in its external environment. Its socio-technical system must permit it to maintain a steady state in which work can be done in the face of changing environmental circumstances. This open system's approach contrasts with that of closed system, which regard the enterprise as sufficiently independent to allow most of its problems to be analyzed with reference to its internal structure and without reference to its external environment. Eric Trist and Fred Emery also identified 4 types of environments to an enterprise basing on a continuum of minimum and slow to maximum and fast changes, namely placid random, placid clustered, disturbed reactive, and turbulent field. The environmental changes are driven by the political, economic, social, and cultural changes that happen on account of either natural evolutionary causes or revolutionary processes like technological, ideological, other than man-made changes. Industrialization, globalization are examples of the latter category. The organizations respond by adaptation strategies of their own. A framework on organization environment interface in an open system perspective in the following postulates. 1. Variations in environmental conditions will bring about changes in decision strategies for input and output components of the firm. 2. Variations in environmental conditions can penetrate the input and output buffers and cause changes in the technical core of the organization. 3. Variations in environmental conditions will alter the dependence of input technical core and output components relative to one another. 4. When input or output components transfer uncertainty rather than absorb it, there will be conflict among input, technical core, and output components. Then he suggests 4 methods such as buffering, smoothing, forecasting, and rationing, by which technological core can seal off itself from environmental changes. These he suggests as organizational actions. Burns and Stocker, 1994, commented that, quote, as the rate of change increases in the technical field, so does the number of occasions which demand quick and effective interpretation between people working in different parts of the system. As the rate of change increases in the market field, so does the need to multiply the points of contact between the concern and the markets it wishes to explore and develop." Unquote. Then, they suggested mechanistic systems and organic systems as two polarities, the former suitable for stable conditions and the latter suitable for changes that introduce new problems and unforeseen contingencies. Paul Lawrence and J. Lorsch defined organization under contingency theory as, quote, "a system of interrelated behaviors of people who are performing a task has been differentiated into several distinct subsystems, each subsystem performing a portion of the task and the efforts of each being integrated to achieve effective performance of the system." Unquote. The term differentiation is explained as the state of segmentation of the organizational system into subsystems, which tends to develop particular attributes in relation to the requirements posed by its relevant external environment. The term integration is explained as the quality of the state of collaboration that exists among departments that is required to achieve unity of effort by the demands of the environment. The above mentioned theories explain the interrelatedness between society, environment, and organization. They also highlight the kinds of environment and the way organizations respond to the vagaries of change happening in environment on account of ever-changing political, economic, social, and cultural conditions. Social processes as sources of human behavior. Human behavior is a learned behavior and hence has scope for continuous learning process involving unlearning and relearning. Socialization, acculturation, and assimilation facilitate human learning at all life stages. Social institutions like family and groups, political institutions, and economic institutions facilitate the socialization process. Individuals as organisms shape their behavior based on their experiential and empirical exposure. Society is a web of social relationships, basic to which is human relations. Human relations are interpersonal relationship between individual and individual, individual and group in both formal and informal settings. The social processes shape the web of social relations. These processes are contact, adjustment and accommodation, conflict, competition, cooperation, assimilation, acculturation, and socialization. Contact. 3 types of contacts are identified in social process, namely physical contact indicating proximity, social contact based on mutuality, awareness and cognition, and psychological contact indicating propinquity. An employee, only after selection, becomes a member of the organization and develops all the 3 levels of contacts gradually with structures, technology, and people, the 3 components of an organization. The best behavior of involvement and commitment are achieved when the individual employee develops propinquity, that is, psychological contact with the job, fellow employees, and the organizational goals. This social process of contact thus indicates the level of human behavior which, on the other extreme, can be indicated by lack of contact leading to apathy, indifference, and estrangement. Contact is an important social process that facilitates group formation. Formal groups are formed by the organization depending on the contact sets required by the interrelatedness between jobs as a contributing factor towards the strengthening of organizational structure and achievement of organizational objectives. Team building exercises like quality circles, cross-functional teams, and project teams further crystallize the formal group processes through contact as a binding force. The informal group processes a reality propagated by Elton Mayo and his associates after the famous Hawthorne experiments and its internal processes explained by the group dynamics theory of Kurt Lewin emerge, though fluidly, based on contact as a foundation principle. The interpersonal relation in informal groups are shaped by proximity and propinquity developed through value systems formed by cognition, awareness, and mutuality. Thus, contact as a social process is an important source of human behavior at work. Adjustment accommodation is an important set of social processes which indicates the human tendency to accept and live with unfavorable, non conducive contradictions, that is, reality both in society and organizations. Adjustment is the preliminary stage of accepting the contradictions and putting up with them as a minimum level of living and letting others live. Accommodation is the higher level of accepting and compromising with the contradictions as an unavoidable necessity, failing which the actor knows that everything would collapse to the detriment of oneself and others. Human behavior, that is, tendency and capability to develop compatibility with unfavorable condition, arises out of this social process. Conflict is a significant social process which reflects in human behavior. Conflict is endemic and sometimes essential. When there is maladjustment of and lack of accommodation between interests and goals, conflict arises. Conflict may occur at intrapersonal level in terms of stress caused by organizational conditions or in the form of approach avoidance, and avoidance goal conflict or personal role conflict. It may arise at the interpersonal level between person and group and group, and at organizational level. Conflict is ingrained in organizations. The example of union-employer conflict not only get limited to employment relations but also becomes representative of class conflict. Thus, conflict in society may find way to the organization. However, conflict left unaddressed is inimical to any system. Win-lose, lose-lose, and win-win are conflict handling strategies adopted by parties to the conflict. Though win-lose is the logic of game theory of conflict, more disastrous outcome can be from the lose-lose positioning. Win-win positioning, though desirable, seldom is achievable. Loss is essential to gain, defeats logically the win-win proposition underlining which there is loss-loss possibility. Conflict is considered by some as having positive value. In groupthink phenomenon, it is considered disastrous if all people think alike. Differences in opinion as embodiment of differences in goals and interests are considered essential for conflict to manifest. Latent conflict is more injurious than open and manifest conflict. Once conflict becomes open, the handling will be easier. But allowing unmanageable levels of conflict is cancerous for any system. Conflict stages like pre-conflict, conflict and conflict aftermath need to be addressed as there is a domino effect in conflict, which means that conflict gives rise to conflict. Competition is another social process which has relevance in all human activities in the society and organization. As resources are few and claimants are many, competition emerges to get the claim. But even a bird has to rise early to get the worm. It is the presence of rule that makes the difference between the competition and conflict. Simply framing of rules may not make competition healthy. The rules shall be mutually agreed upon. Institutional arrangements shall be made in order to implement the rules to the satisfaction of all. If not, competition may brew into conflict. Organization-initiated competition systems are promotions, performance pay, etc., which, unless administered through explainable organizational justice mechanisms, may give rise to conflict. Competition has become a global process testing the competitive advantage of corporates. Cooperation. It is a positive and desirable social process which shapes human behavior towards affiliation, coalition, and co-optation. An overdose of conflict, howsoever endemic it might be, is to the detriment of organized society. So, cooperative structures and systems are developed both as reactive and proactive approach to conflict. Conflict reduction and maximization of cooperation is the symptom of healthy organized societies. Structure functions, processes, systems are institutionalized to bring orderliness in society as well as organization. There can be degree of cooperation in terms of loyalty, involvement, and commitment which have behavioral implications. Assimilation is a social process that promotes taking in and absorbing external stimulus into the system. It is a psychological, social, and cultural tendency and ability to receive new facts and realities and internalize into the behavior patterns of the recipient. Starting from ethnic societies to individuals, including organizations, consistently undergo this process. Assimilation is central to learning. As learning is crucial to behavior modification, assimilation plays a seminal role in organizational dynamics. It is the process on which the processes of acculturation and socialization rest. Acculturation and socialization processes contribute to the perpetuation, self-renewal, and continuity of society. Individuals, groups, communities, institutions, organizations, and one and all in a system undergo these processes for growth and development. Change, as is endemic, is achieved by forces of acculturation and socialization. All those in a society find it imperative to change, and evolutionary long-lasting change happens through these processes, which make the adaptation easy through the process of assimilation. The whole gamut of social processes needs to be viewed from an integrated perspective. Contact as the first process brings the individual entities in relation with other individuals and collective entities. How to fine-tune contacts to one's advantage is learnt by processes of assimilation, acculturation, and socialization through the experiences of adjustment and accommodation, failure of which exposes one to conflicts. Competition and cooperation are soothers which attempt to reduce conflict and improve compatibility in the system. Assimilation, acculturation, and socialization are neither the last processes nor do they happen at the end. Rather, these processes occur at every stage continuously and persistently. The interplay between various social processes in a given space and time result into learnt behavior patterns of an organism in the society, which shapes one's values, personality, and culture. These reflect in organizational behavior, which includes both the behavior of people in organizations and behavior of organization in total environment. Individual differences is an important concept of OB. The organism is always exposed to diverse and varied socio-cultural, political, and economic systems. It would internalize values, customs, belief patterns, culture through processes of assimilation, acculturation, and socialization, which would shape the idiosyncratic behavior patterns. When organizations have to manage behavior of people at work, they have to manage diversities. In the management of people at work, knowledge of social processes is hence essential. Process levels from individual micro level to society macro level. Parikh observes that in an organization, several levels operate simultaneously, from individuals who work in the organization to the whole society, which constitutes the context in which the organization functions. He identifies 9 levels between the micro level and macro level. Different processes operate at different levels in an integrated framework. There is an intricate relationship between these. Organizations can practice OB in a better way once they understand these relations. Changing society and organizations in India. In the changed context in India, some paradoxical paradigm shifts in social institutions and processes can be identified. 1. Indigenous development adopting models of Western intellectual rationality. 2. Emerging new norms and belief patterns promoting culture of consumerism and change in lifestyle towards materialism, while old norms of self-sufficiency, satisfaction, and spiritualism are getting eroded. 3. Disintegration of joint families and neglect of family and social values while strengthening the organizational values and values leading to individualism as against pluralism. 4. Old social institutions like caste and hierarchical structures are dissipating, but new dependency on collective institutions like civil society, human rights, and NGO groups is increasing. 5. Greater convergence of role of male and female is evident, but gender discrimination and bias has not reduced. 6. Ascribed status giving way to achieved status in economic sphere, while political system still clings onto ascribed status as evident from the family monopoly. 7. Diversity is increasing with the same tempo as intolerance and narrow parochialism. These contradictions happen in vibrant and fast-changing societies. One has to keep them in mind while analyzing human behavior at work. Summary. The open systems concept indicate that all systems are related to and dependent on one another directly or indirectly. For civilized living, organized systems are essential. Society is the largest system, of which organizations are subsystems. There is resource dependency between organizations that establishes their interface. The society manages its interface with organizations through institutionalization. There are differences of approach between old institutional and new institutional thinkers. Society representing pluralist interests can impose institutions on organizations is the focus of old institutionalists, whereas participatory institutionalization is advocated by the neo institutionalists. The interface between society and organization is intervened by environment, which stems from the social institutions and directly impacts the organization. Various shades of thought describe this interface, examining types of environmental changes and responses of the organizations. The social processes regulating the human relations and behavior in the larger society play a significant and similar role in organizations, justifying the claim that organizations are miniature society. In understanding, analyzing, predicting, and managing human behavior at work, that is, micro-OB, as well as the organization's behavior in the larger environment, macro-OB, the knowledge of social processes is essential.
We were listening to the audiobook by the School of Management Studies IGNOU for MBA program. Course code Mmpc 011, titled Social Processes and Behavioral Issues. Course coordinator Professor Srilata. Voiceover by Renuka. Edited by Ashok Sharma. Program assisted by Tarannum Jahan. Program produced by Dr. Manoj Kumar Singh. This program was brought to you by Electronic Media Production Center of Indira Gandhi National Open University.